Folks, here we go. All right. Good evening, everyone. This is a public meeting of the School Board of West Bend Joint School District Number 1. More than 24 hours prior to the meeting, notice of the time, place, date, and subject matter of this meeting was posted at the entrance doors of the Education Service Center and at the West Bend Community Memorial Library. A copy was also sent to the Daily News, WIBD, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and other media sources that have requested notice of our meetings. And I'd ask our superintendent to confirm that this meeting was properly posted.
Yes, it has.
Great. Thank you very much. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we recognize a quorum with 5 members present. Mr. Ongert has an excused absence due to a death in the family, so our sympathies and thoughts are with him and his family. And we expect Connie Schmidt shortly. But we will begin with our business. So the first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. There we go, is the approval of the agenda. I would move to approve the agenda as it has been presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great. We'll give that one to Erin. Thank you, Erin. Second by Erin. Motion and second to approve the agenda. Any final discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. All right. I'm excited that it is time for our students report because we haven't heard our students report for a while because of the craziness in the world. And so I'm inviting forward, is that Emily there? Excellent. Emily Justman from East. Emily, we look forward to your report. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope you are all doing well. This last week and upcoming weeks are busy when it comes to academics. Students and teachers are getting in the last of their large projects, papers, and tests before winter break. I talked to a few of my friends and asked what they're up to in each of their classes. In general academics, marketing students are finishing up a final project. For this project, they have to create a PowerPoint on what they learned during this class and their experience. Video production has just learned about what goes into a film during the pre-production phase, production, and post-production. Some English students just finished learning about medieval periods and the Renaissance. They read important pieces during the time, like Hamlet and the Canterbury Tales. Now they moved on to neoclassicism. Psychology is going through a lot of different subjects, but more recently they moved into motivation, emotion, intelligence, and language and development. Sociology just finished learning about how much of an impact society has on politics and the economy. Geometry students are just learning about sine, cosine, tangent, and in order to find the length of triangle sides. In extracurricular classes like music appreciation, they're learning more about the classical era and important composers of that time. Staying on the topic of music, band has been given work to do on Canvas that pertains to their concert season, and in person days they are playing pieces with multiple instrument parts using bucket drums. Update for East Athletics. Boys varsity basketball beats Homestead 91-63 on the 11th. Boys varsity wrestling beat Hartford Union 64-12. December 2nd, girls varsity basketball beat Port Washington 93-27. And upcoming in athletics, girls basketball goes up against Whitefish Bay on the 18th. And the 19th, boys hockey goes up against Kettle Moraine. And lastly, general announcements. December 9th was the blood drive for West Bend High School. And from what I've heard, it went extremely well. Student Mental Health Education Group started for WBVA high school students looking for some in-person connection with others. And December 7th was the local virtual scholarship kickoff night, urging seniors to prepare and apply for scholarships. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Emily. And we're also going to hear from Abigail Eckert. Abigail, welcome.
Hello everyone. I'm sorry if I'm a little sweaty and maybe even smelly. I just came from basketball practice where we are preparing for a big game against Slinger tomorrow. I don't know about anyone else, but this is my favorite time of the year, and the high school is definitely starting to get into the holiday spirit. Every day this week has a dress-up theme. Today, everyone is sporting their favorite pair of festive socks. Other days this week include Holiday Hat Day, Pajama Day, Candy Cane Day, and my personal favorite, Ugly Sweater Day on Friday. Clubs are also finding ways to celebrate the season. SEED, the environmental club, is throwing a recyclable Christmas party. Many groups such as Interact, Key Club, and NHS are volunteering at Enchantment in the Park. NHS is also writing holiday greetings and thank you notes to first responders, medical workers, and nursing home residents to spread a little extra joy in this unusual holiday season. Finally, the annual Winter Blood Drive run by the Student Council was once again a huge success. The theme this year was Masks On, Sleeves Up. Although there are always a few horror stories of underprepared students passing out or disappointed first-time donors turned away for low iron levels or a high heart rate, overall, the staff and students saved countless lives through their donations. Winter break and the end of first semester are just around the corner, but classes are still chugging away. Last week, the World Affairs class finished their simulation of the International Criminal Court, where they put Darth Vader on trial in order to better understand how the court functions in a relatable way. This year, the class found Vader guilty of genocide by killing, guilty of war crime of attacking civilians, but innocent on the charge of war crime of willful killing. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Next week, the class will begin their car buying simulation as they learn about negotiation and conflict resolution. The AP Environmental Science classes are learning about sustainable agriculture and the importance of maintaining healthy soil and strong root systems to prevent erosion, soil loss, and desertification. Physics classes are diving into the world of forces, friction, free body diagrams, and acceleration. In other news, scholarship application for seniors began with a virtual meeting last Monday. Columns and their partners awarded over $850,000 last year to West Bend seniors and expect to award even more this year. They pride themselves on offering scholarships to everyone, from those pursuing a bachelor's degree to an associate's degree to those entering the trades. Applications will be due in February, with interviews being held in March. In the athletic world, all winter sports are up and running. Both boys and girls basketball teams have started the season 3-1. The boys bowling team has started their season 27-0 in their games. The Ice Bears hockey team is also undefeated in the North Shore Conference. Jan Lancer just broke the all-school diving record, and Kevin Fitzgerald recently broke the 100 backstroke record. West Athletics has found a way to give back to the community through starting the Spartans Reading Buddies Club, where athletes virtually read a book to elementary students. Apparently, some of the elementary students think that they are being read to real professional athletes. Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you, Abigail. And also thank you to both of you for keeping us updated on what's going on. Appreciate it very much. Thank you for coming tonight. All right. We come to the public participation portion of our agenda. I do not have any public participation comment cards. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board at this time? All right, seeing none, we will move forward with our consent agenda. And on our consent agenda, we have minutes of our regular board meeting from November 30th, disbursements posted to December 14th, 2020, revenues and expenses in the aggregate July 2020 through November 2020, ratification of contracts or resignations, if any. I would move to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second, Ted.
Great. Thank you, Kurt, for the second. Motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Any final discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion to approve the consent agenda carries. All right, that takes us to the superintendent's report. Superintendent Wimmer.
Just a few updates. Prior to the break, we made some adjustments to our calendar, and I just wanted to publicly report that we had seen some all-time highs leading into those breaks, and what we did with the calendar made the adjustments that we needed. We saw numbers go down and then stabilize. So we were able to disrupt that increase that we were seeing just prior to break. We've been holding steady. We're seeing a slow climb entering to this break, but knowing that we're 7 days away. I feel very confident around what we're doing. So, and just recall that when we return, we'll have a couple more planning days after winter break that'll help us disrupt that again. So again, with both students and staff, that's created the disruption that we needed as staffing was getting a little dicey going into those breaks. With that said, one of the changes we made was that cohort model at the high school level. They're in their third week of alternating days, but we just wanted to reinforce the message. I know we've sent it to families, but with the community, that the school is open 5 days a week. So if your child is one who that routine and structure of going to school every day, our libraries are open. If you have an unstable connection at home, let us know. We can deploy a hotspot, or you're welcome to come to school. They do have some signups, and I have several students attending anywhere from 4 to 5 days per week at the high school. So again, they might not be going into their classroom because we want to keep those class sizes very low so that we're avoiding quarantines. But again, we recognize that some students, it's not their preferred platform, so we'd welcome them into school in whatever fashion that we can to support their learning. And again, just a reminder that there's a sign up for that, so we can make sure that we have adequate space too. And then I think the biggest topic, and I made sure to call it out on the agenda, was a review of the COVID-19 response plan update. It's a pretty significant update. I wanted to bring that here for public discussion and readiness. I know that in the beginning when we did that, we authorized our team to make necessary adjustments as needed, but just wanted to have a conversation. The CDC released new guidance. DHS followed. Took them a few days delay. I notified our families right away that we would be moving forward with the reduction from quarantine from the 14 days to the 10, so students can return on the 11th day. But there were other components around testing that we really needed to unpack and manage and make sure the system was prepared to do that. So if you want to look at our public document in your board documents, we've kind of put what that recommended language would be for the public, but we are ready and prepared to go with the reduction to the 7-day quarantine with a negative test. So the public health department worked very hard, and they've released publicly, it's on their website, and it's linked in ours, that their Washington County Fair Park will be increasing their testing access. You can go through, I think they have capacity for 500 tests a day. They're looking at a 24 to 48 hour turnaround to support our community in getting tested. So if families would like an early return option with a negative test, they can do so. We're not requiring anyone to get a test. That's just if you would like the early return option. So it lays out what type of test, and again, a PCR, or the other formal name is nucleic acid amplification test. The PCR test is the one given at Fair Park. And our public health, through their budgeting, you would bring your ID, your proof of insurance. If you don't have insurance, you can still get a test, and that cost would be covered if insurance can't be billed. So there's access for all of our families, regardless of insurance status. And that was important for us too before moving forward with our plans. Our health room professionals are ready. So once we put this in play, we've got our communications ready. Our families have kind of been waiting on the logistics. Families can certainly bring us just proof of that negative test, and an administrator or a health room professional would reach out and talk with you to give you an amended return date to school. So you would wait for that authorization once we've vetted that test, that negative result. And also, it really shortens the window, now that we're in cold and flu season, for kids who are exhibiting some symptoms. If they have a negative test, we can rule that out, and they can return to school and return to learning. I think it's really important to speak to the why behind the shifts. It's because in the last 9 months, there's been a lot learned about COVID-19, and the changes you see aren't just lessening of expectations. They're not lowering a bar. They're not because our community wanted it. They're because the CDC and DHS recommended it based on the data that they're seeing, based on treatment, based on transmission, based on all of those things. So again, our plans have always taken into account CDC, DHS, and public health planning. So we're very comfortable and confident in moving forward and deploying that piece as well. Are there any questions from the board about that?
So just mechanically, the 7 days. So if a student is out of school, would they get the test? Let's say they wanted to get the test on day 5, wait for the results to come back, and then on day 7. Can you walk through the timeline of how that would work? Thank you.
So, well, they're all a little bit different. And if you look at, we will send this fabulous chart out with just an opening paragraph, and it'll give you the chart that walks through, but it has to hit at least day 6 in some circumstances, and then their return would be by day 8. Kind of thing. If you were at home with a family member who's tested positive, it used to be a 24-day quarantine. Now that's down to 20. Now with the early return, you could be testing on day 16 and returning as early as day 18, that kind of thing. So you're garnering days. And again, if you were sick and you were sent home that you're displaying symptoms of, if you go and get a test with that negative test, you can return upon proof of that negative test. So there's no wait period for that one. So you're right, in each case, there's kind of on what day. And we really, because it is confusing, we really spelled it out. If this, then this, on this day, here's who you prove it to, and then here's who's gonna contact you to let you know the new date. So again, our health room professionals are doing a great job managing all those pieces of the puzzle.
Other questions? Erin?
When is that going out to families? When is that going out to families?
We would send that out tomorrow.
Okay.
Like I said, families who are interested, they can look at the recommended language right in the plan right now. It's just listed in red as recommended so that you can see it. And we have a direct message that would go out tomorrow, again, just with this chart showing you if this, then this. And they can always contact our health room professionals, district nurse, or my office, and we can answer questions as well.
I'm appreciative that administration is adapting to the newer information. It sounds like that just gives greater flexibility to families and the ability for more students to be in school sooner.
Absolutely, both students and staff in a manner that is taking it into context the new guidance and keeping everyone safe and healthy. So happy to adapt.
Any other questions? All right. Let's see. The next item then on our agenda is our committee report from the Curriculum Committee meeting, which was held on December 8th of 2020. And Erin, are you going to give that update?
I am.
Great.
So as you said, the Curriculum Committee met on Tuesday, December 8th, and we talked about a couple things. The first thing that we spoke about was the high school reading intervention, and that was being walked through the revision of a course, retitling it because the previous course had the name of a vendor right in the course name, and we no longer use that vendor. The revised course would begin next semester and would be more individualized approach to helping those students that need some extra help in reading. It is for credit, and students that take that, there's a team of teachers and counselors that work to recommend that that be a good fit for the student. It's to get students up to at least a 9th grade reading level. The next item we spoke about was a review of educational options in the West Penn School District for the following school year. That needs to be communicated to the public once a year, and it's the notice of the options. I'm not going to go into that too much because that actually is on our agenda tonight, information item number 9 on the agenda. The third item we spoke about was course planning guide updates. All the course updates that will be in the new course guide are things that were already approved by this board. And then just some simple modifications, grammatic, punctuation kind of things. And that will be ready for the next school year, probably coming out, I think, this month for course selections for next year. And then the final item on our agenda from last week is the finance and information course at the middle school level, looking at a revision to what is included in that course, changing it from, changing the name of it, and then expanding what is taught in that class, from moving just from a finance and information technology to including entrepreneurship, business, IT, a little bit of everything, to help kids kind of figure out what really fit them, and they can expand on that in high school. And that is on our agenda tonight as a discussion item, so we'll learn some more about that. Our next curriculum committee meeting is January 5th.
Great. Sounds like the committee's been very busy. Thank you for your work, everyone. Appreciate that. All right. Okay, we are going to move to the action items portion of our agenda. We have a number of items related to compensation, and Mr. Lenny Hansen will walk us through that. The first item is approval of 2020-2021 Certified Staff Novice Salary Scale. Please take it away.
Thank you, members of the board, for welcoming me tonight. There are a number of items as you described, but they are interrelated in that how we approach compensation really on all of these items is designed to align with our strategic direction for the district and our strategic approach to staff retention and recruitment. So all of these items really factor into that. So I'll go through them one by one. But I'll try to tell a story about how they really connect to each other as we go. So the overview to provide for you first relates to the timing of tonight's discussion. Our goal in a normal year is not to be talking about compensation changes in December, when we're almost halfway through the school year at that point. When we're talking about compensation tonight, we're really talking about compensation for the 20 to 21 school year, and obviously we're many months into that. The reason for that this year, like many things, as you know, is due to the pandemic. We needed to make a prudent judgment about the best timing to make decisions such related to compensation, as they obviously have a significant impact on the budget. And earlier on during the pandemic, the potential budgetary impact of loss of state tax revenue and those sort of items was in question. And we wanted to verify that our revenues would come in as expected, and we also needed to see what sort of unforeseen expenditures were going to come through because of the pandemic. And there were many of those as well. We were very pleased that A, state tax revenue was better than initially projected, and B, that allowed the state to deliver on its promises for delivering revenues to school districts throughout the state for this school year. It was the second year of a biennium budget, so we had gone into this year being very confident knowing what was going to take place until the virus struck. Ultimately, like I said, the revenues that we expected came through, and that allows us now to go back to the strategic direction we wanted to go with compensation and make some proposals to you tonight. So that's kind of the overview around that. The other important piece to know as we talk through these items is you will recall back on June 1st, this board approved the new teacher compensation model. It replaced the teacher salary framework, which had been adopted in 2014. We had numerous discussions at board meetings with staff compensation committees and other groups about the problems associated with that previous framework. So it was very exciting to move forward with a replacement model, which would allow us to better strategize around staff retention and recruitment. At that time, we proposed to the board, and the board approved the overall model, but there were some sub-components of that model that we tabled for those budgetary question marks at the time. Some of those have been resolved since, and one of those big items is our first topic here, which is the novice salary scale. So the compensation model has a novice salary scale that predetermines what a new educator's salary is for a certified staff member in their first 5 years in the district. The previous novice salary scale identified the first 4 years. The new proposal adds a year. Beyond that, it also increases the amount that is allocated for each of those first 5 years if you are an educator in one of those lanes. The amounts in the old model were highly competitive when adopted in 2014. However, the old salary framework did not have a process for annual review and updating, and therefore those numbers had been static since 2014. So while they were highly competitive upon their initial implementation, their competitiveness had eroded over time. Our goal with this new proposal is to bring forth a highly competitive novice salary scale. When I look at our retention and recruitment of our staff, it is at the lower end of the experience spectrum where we struggle the most, both in terms of recruitment and retention. Our overall staff retention rate is excellent. It's between 6 and 7% pretty consistently the last 3 years. Where we do lose teachers is in that first decade or so of teaching, and especially in the earlier part of that. This novice salary scale is intended to address that. It's intended to create a sense of stability for our new educators in our system so that they come into our system with the intent of staying. That predictability that scale creates really helps those educators see this as a long-term landing spot for themselves in their career, and not a situation where their compensation is completely unknown from year to year, which can lead to a lot of shopping around by educators thinking, well, I might have to move to another district. I don't know what's going to happen next year with my compensation. So the salary scale is intended to address that concern, which in many districts does exist, and they have worse retention rates because of that. So the first proposal is around that novice scale. So I'm happy to answer questions about that. As we get into the other increases as we go forth, we've really divided the increases into several tiers, and each of them, they don't overlap. So anyone that's impacted by this novice salary increase that we're talking about here would not be impacted by other increases that we talk about later in the meeting. The last item before I open up for discussion, I apologize, is to let you know that we want to continue to value loyalty and years of service in the system. Therefore, even though this salary scale only shows the first 5 years, we know by making the increases we're proposing, we would risk some individuals with less experience passing some others who have more experience. So therefore, the increase proposal that you'll find after this in the agenda ensures that we also provide some additional increases to those individuals in years 6, 7, and a few in year 8 to make sure that we keep proper alignment and steps between individuals so that there's fairness and equity in the model. So I'll open up to discussions around the novice salary scale at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Hanson?
I guess, Lenny, from the standpoint of, mechanics, you talk about, the novice scale being put in place in 2014 and basically being static. So getting ahead of the game, the plan would be next May, June, I assume we're talking 21-22's budget. This would be a component for discussion and potential adjustment at that point in time?
Yes, one of the items we built into the new compensation model is the requirement for an annual review presented by administration to the board of the novice salary scale. Now, whether that review every year results in an increase is, obviously a year-to-year market analysis decision, but every year it will be presented. The ideal time frame is what you describe. In a situation like we find ourselves in the state of Wisconsin, where budgets are passed by the state in a 2-year manner, it's hard to always hit the exact same mark, because in one of those years you have a perfect idea of what the revenues are going to be, and in other years you don't. That being said, we also, no matter what the revenues are, need to be focused on our strategic staff retention and recruitment goals. So no matter what, it's going to be brought forth, but the exact timing is somewhat flexible depending on the nature of the state budget.
Thank you.
Other questions? Well, I'm persuaded that it certainly makes sense to offer competitive wages to attract good quality teachers in the first place. So Mr. Ants, would you like us to deal with these kind of motion by motion as we go
Yep,
through them?
after this one, we'll move on to the next one, and I'll give a little soliloquy around that, too.
All right, very good. I would therefore move to approve the 2020-2021 Certified Staff Novice Salary Scale as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you, Paul. Motion and second to approve the Certified Staff Novice Salary Scale. Any final discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, and then the next item would be certified staff compensation for 2020-2021.
So, to avoid confusion, novice staff educators are also certified staff. What we're going to be talking about now are any certified staff not impacted by the novice increases that we just discussed. So, as we do each year, we engaged in collective bargaining negotiations over base wages with the West Bend Education Association. We had multiple negotiation sessions. I was a participant, as was Mr. Sarno. I walked away with an incredibly positive sense from the nature of those discussions. They were extremely cordial, extremely productive, some really good productive back and forth. Really successful, I think, communication by both sides of where we're coming from, what our goals are, how our individual proposals align to those goals. Those negotiations, we did end in us not being able to come to a full agreement, but I can say that the amount of gratitude expressed in both directions sitting at that table over the very genuine willingness to really talk back and forth and try to understand each other was a very positive outcome of those negotiations, and I'm sure Mr. Sarno would echo that. We weren't able to come to a complete agreement on those negotiations, so therefore we are bringing forth a final proposal that we think is aligned to a number of key drivers for us for staff compensation. So the first key driver for us through this entire item has been that we stay within the confines of the budget, okay? That this must fall within our budgeted amount. The second piece is that it aligns to the strategic goals and direction that's laid out in the compensation model, which we believe it does. And third, and more so than anything, again, drives that desire to retain and recruit excellent educators in our district. We, as part of that, pulled together all of the different resources that we had available and looked at how the compensation model is structured. As you may recall, our compensation model has a salary ceiling component where each year, that's another item that we propose to the board of what the salary ceiling is. It currently sits at $75,000. And the model calls that we provide pay increases of differing amounts for those below the ceiling and those above the ceiling. And there's a number of purposes behind that organization of the model. But again, our biggest goal is retention, recruitment. We feel that design allows us to accomplish that, and we discussed that ad nauseum in the spring when we talked about the model. Therefore, we are bringing forth a proposal that both stays within the confines of the budget, but also we feel provides some meaningful increases to all certified staff members. Those below the salary ceiling, it's a proposed $1,000 across the board increase, and those at or above the ceiling, it's a proposed $585 increase across the board. In order to move forward, since negotiations did not result in a final agreement, there are actually two motions that the board would need to adopt. The first is to declare negotiations at an impasse, which during negotiations, the WBA and Mr. Sarno and I came to a very cordial agreement that it appeared we were at that moment where we were not going to be able to move any further or closer on agreement. So we'd have to first declare that impasse, and there's a resolution attached for you in board docs with the details of that. And then if that were to be approved by the board, the second motion would be to approve the compensation proposal as presented also in board docs for you. So open to discussion. I can tell you that we did do quite a bit of market analysis, both in the immediate nearby region as well as the wider region and the state, around how various districts were approaching compensation increases amidst the pandemic. What I can tell you is that there were a large number of districts who still move forward with compensation increases, either through their compensation model or other means, which for our perspective means there's a competitiveness question here, that we need to maintain competitiveness, not just on the novice salaries that we just discussed, but on all of our teacher salaries. Beyond that, from more of a personal perspective, I think we all are aware that the work that our staff as a whole and our educators are putting in to put together a great program for our students this year is really unprecedented. As you know, many, many districts throughout this state have not been able to deliver a high-quality face-to-face educational option like the West Bend School District has, and that has required an all-hands-on-deck approach by our educators, our support staff, our administrators, who have put in incredible effort and gone well above and beyond what is even the norm for an already very stressful and challenging profession. I think if there's ever been a year that educators have been due the respect for the great work they've done, there's no year more deserving than this one. And I would suggest that it is critical for us to maintain that competitiveness, but also communicate to our staff with pay increases that we value that loyalty and incredible dedication that they've shown this year.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hansen?
If no questions, then I will move to declare the negotiations with the West Bend Education Association for 2020-21 school year at an impasse, and to approve the 2020-21 teacher base wage negotiations resolution as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Nancy, for the second. All right, motion to declare negotiations at an impasse. Any final discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. All right, and then I will make the motion to implement the district's 2020-2021 teacher compensation proposal as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second. Erin?
Thank you. Thank you, Erin. Motion and second to implement the teacher compensation proposal. Any final discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? That motion carries. All right, thank you. Let's see, and then our next item is, turn the page on my agenda here, support staff compensation. Mr. Hansen.
So when you look at the compensation increases for certified staff that you just approved, when you add in the novice increases with the other increases that you've just approved, and look at that as a percentage of total salary, it equates to 1.65% of total salary compensation for our certified staff. As you are well aware, the key to our success is not only our certified staff, but all of our staff, including our support staff, which in terms of number of employees nearly numbers the number of people we have in that certified staff group, between aides, school nutrition, custodial, clerical, all sorts of different groups that come together to make all the amazing things happen in our building and allow our educators to teach. That work is critically important as well. We have proposed a 1.65% increase for the support staff as well, so that would stay in line with the total amount that you just approved for the certified staff. The allocation of that is a little bit different, and that's pretty typical across school systems, that how you look at the compensation of support staff employees versus certified, as far as doing it on a percentage basis versus doing it as flat dollar amounts, is not uncommon to see, particularly because in the certified staff realm, you have a whole lot of people in the same job, right? Like technically teacher, right? And so you see this wide range, whereas in support staff, you see a lot more of what you see more in the private sector, where a lot of tiered pay grades are used. And that means that in translation, what that means is that an across-the-board percentage is more common, just as you often see in the private sector, for example. So there's 2 items that are part of a single proposal here. One is a 1.65% increase for all support staff, or a 30-cent per hour increase, whichever is greater. We did that same mechanism last year, and the purpose of it is to raise that floor of some of our lower paid positions, so that we can, especially right now where a lot of those positions are extremely competitive in the job market. So there's that piece of the proposal. And then we also propose an increase to the starting wage for our part-time custodial employees. You may recall last year we had done a pretty large increase to that group. It did yield positive results in terms of our recruitment and retention with that group. We do feel, based on another market analysis of both school districts and the private sector, that we need to continue growing the floor in that position. So we increased that position's starting wage by 15 cents as well. So those are the primary components there. So I'd open it to discussion with the group.
Any questions? Hearing none, I would move to approve the compensation increases for affected support staff employees as presented. Is there a second? Thank you, Nancy, for the second. Motion and second to approve the compensation increases for affected support staff employees. Any final discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then administrator compensation.
Thank you. We have 3 primary employee groups in our district that are more full-time type employees. We have our certified staff, we have our support staff, and we have an administrator staff. The proposal before you is very similar to the support staff proposal that you just approved. It takes that same percentage, 1.65%, and applies that on the administrator salaries as well. Again, keeping all of those groups in the same, in line with the total percentage of increase. So that is the proposal that is before you now, and I'm happy to have discussion with the group.
Any questions?
I just have a quick question, and I know, Lenny, you've referenced this in the past, so perhaps you could just give us a little more background on it. How often do we do wage studies to compare us to surrounding districts? I know you did quite a bit of that with the teacher salary, and I really appreciate the fact that you did that. I'd like to know where we're at with the administrator salaries and how we compare with maybe not just our surrounding districts, but maybe in southeastern Wisconsin, comparable size districts. Obviously, we have a lot of different level administrators as far as assistants and directors and principals, et cetera, et cetera. So if you could give us a little background on that.
Sure. So we're fortunate in that public education salaries are all public for anyone to see. And through the DPI WISE staff system, we can get some great detail about salaries. So we basically every year review all those salaries before we bring compensation increases before the board. Now, I can say every year, this is only my second year doing it, but that's been our process. Beyond that, we are looking at creating more of a cycle around specific, more targeted groups, and particularly in that support staff area. When I look at our support staff ranges, for example, I think there is room for a lot more investigation into the individual positions, but that's a different kind of review cycle that we're talking about. So what I will say is we review them each time before we would present compensation proposals to you. What I'll also say is that Superintendent Wimmer and I have really been looking at the overall organizational structure. Her coming into our district with a real different lens from multiple systems is really helping us take a wider scale look at how we organize those, our pay grades from the very highest level on down. So what I can tell you is that we are doing an even deeper dig right now on that administrator component, as well as some of the other pieces as well, because we feel that, given the situation we have, where we have some stability now in our on the operations side, with Mr. Sarno having been here almost 2 years now, I've been here, Superintendent Wimmer coming in, the kind of time is ripe for us to really do a deep dig into the ideal structure for our organization, and then how those salaries align to that. So I do foresee us coming up with a very lasting proposal in the near future. There's been a lot of changes made by individual superintendents, I would say, over the last decade to certain small components of our organizational chart, but that's problematic when you do it in isolation, because the pieces need to work together, and the equity can't be properly addressed if you don't look at it as a full picture. So, that gives you some information. I don't know if the superintendent has other pieces she'd like to share on that.
No, just like you said, we need to have a more in-depth analysis and to kind of bring something together at this point around that deep dive would be premature for us. So we want to do that work in a manner that keeps you engaged, informed as the process unfolds and what we're looking at, and have some checkpoints for some questions before any kind of final recommendation. Again, looking at a much wider net and in-depth look.
Thank you for the clarification. I think that helps for people, who maybe aren't as in the know as we as school board members, to understand that, we're taking a, 50,000-foot ceiling look at this, and we're going to really kind of try and plug in all the pieces. It seems like, as you kind of stated, we've done a little piecemealing in the past, but I like the idea that we're, kind of looking at it at a broad spectrum and then taking that down. So I thank you for all the work that you've done on this. I know that this is not an easy project, and I know there's a lot of time and effort that goes into it. So thank you for the comprehensive report.
Great. Good discussion. Any other questions, comments? All right, hearing none, I would make a motion to approve the compensation increases for affected members of the administrative staff as presented. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Paul, for the second. Motion to approve the compensation increases for affected members of the administrative staff. Any final discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your work. All right, we have a number of items now on the discussion portion of our agenda, and the first two, Mr. Annie Sarno will walk us through. First one being proposed budget calendar for 2021-2022. Mr. Sarno.
Good evening, members of the board. Superintendent Wimmer, thank you for the opportunity tonight. This is for informational purposes only. We've had, as I look back to the last year, as we've gotten into a normal cycle of what I'd say, that there's a lot of different budget steps, because from the point of beginning discussions about one budget, going through the fiscal year, and then that audit wrap-up, you're looking at almost a 24-month period of time, even though you have a 12-month fiscal period. So presented to you again for discussion information is what would be the next year, starting July 1st, excuse me, 2021-2022 budget. It meets statutory requirements. Those are addressed in this document, and it's attached in board docs. It looks at not just next year, but above and beyond that. You'll notice that there's steps. Years ago, we utilized a Baird forecast model for budgeting. It incorporates planning information. It allows us to get a financial picture further out based on some assumptions and variables that, first of all, we have control of some of them, and then second of all, there's more of a consensus approach to that based on some other inputs from across the state. So we're going to be starting that again here. In fact, Baird already has our data. We're going to be playing with it and utilizing that here over the next couple of weeks. It connects the administration to the board. It connects the administration and board to the staff, and it engages the community. There's appropriate times when they're brought forward for informational purposes, for soliciting input. All of that comes together as a full circle through this process. So just briefly, and I don't want to read to you, and this is meant to change slightly. As an example, I already have one of them, is where tonight the first item is the facilities capital projects are presented to you for informational purposes. I'd had down here that we're going to be bringing that back forward on January 25th. Mr. Ross feels more comfortable having a couple extra weeks. We're actually going to be bringing that forward on January 11th. So There could be subtle tweaks. There's not pieces that would go missing as we progress through this cycle, but just a lot of the different components needed to bring forward all of the different pieces of a comprehensive budget. Again, those statutory, those communication pieces and whatnot. Are there any questions that you have at this point in time? Would you like to go through the document just a little bit, you know, or I'd be happy to share some of it with you?
Preference? Maybe some of the highlights.
Okay. Again, this evening, discussing facilities, our improvements, those dollars that we're setting aside, trying to be fiscally responsible to the community with those facilities, which is probably our second biggest asset behind our staff. So that's the first piece. Again, where I referenced the Baird forecast model, beginning that step and getting that rolling. Very important part in being able to plan for not just the next year, but a little bit further out with the information that's available to us. I'm going to start working with the cabinet, the executive group, Superintendent Wimmer, Mr. Hansen, and understanding what staffing looks like next year, as he alluded to, and understanding some projections on revenues. Again, based on some assumptions, this will be the first year of the next biennial budget with the state, and being able to make some assumptions with that. But again, based on that Baird forecast model, that's going to add another opportunity. It'll add another layer to our tool belt that we'll be able to use. Again, bringing some things forward to you guys for approval. Statutory is an example. Administrative contracts are due. Those renewals are due by the end of January, so addressing that here at either the first or the second meeting in January. Bringing together some awareness topics to you as a group as well. More cabinet work, and again, as we look at, there's certain processes that we roll out, so once we establish some school allocations, dollars that they have discretionary at doing what they need to operate their buildings, rolling those budgets out to the budget owners, both at the schools and within the departments. Second page, we're rolling into April, just as a heads up, and this is meant to be not just the 1 year, but keeping other things in mind as well. I think for the last umpteen years, I've utilized April 15th because it's a memorable date. By then, we should really be stopping the spending for the current year. There are certainly exceptions. In a family and consumer science classroom, you're not going to buy a dozen eggs for a lab on April 15th to use on a June 1st food lab. That's just not reasonable. There's staff development and whatnot that might continue, but for the most part, we should not be ordering textbooks, as an example, after April 15th because they're very unlikely to even arrive, let alone would they even be used within that fiscal year. So there are certain parameters that we put in place to address that as well, just to keep that fresh in our minds. Contracts with teachers where we have some preliminary non-renewals, we have some final contracts, and again, this is different groups that are involved. So Lenny may be presenting something to you guys. That action that would be taken, then Lenny would be communicating to the staff and issuing those contracts and whatnot. So incorporates all of the different pieces over the summer. DPI releasing information, very preliminary information on July 1st. Incorporates what our 102nd annual meeting budget hearing will be like on September 27th this next fall, and then eventually just setting the final levy budget and mill rate on October 25th of this next fall. And much like I always do when I have this, I've got one last caveat, is taking a look at the 2022-23 budget in early November of next year.
Great, thank you for the recap, and I appreciate the transparency to the community on all the items that go into the budget. This is very helpful. Any other discussion on the calendar? If not, we'll move forward to the proposed capital projects for 2021-2022.
I'm going to refresh the screen. I'm in board docs, and full disclosure, over the weekend we had an initial Excel document related to this topic that we're now talking about, And Dave Ross is working remotely right now, so I'm going to be helping with this topic this evening. But we had a document, and it was up on the screen earlier, an Excel document. There wasn't a description here in this building code. That means something to me, that means something to Dave, might not mean a whole heck of a lot to you guys or the community. We did upload a second document that had the description. That had a description of the building that number referenced. But I want to be fully open, is that some of the formatting of that second document, I wanted it to be able to go on the screen for you guys to look at it as well. I shared an 11 by 17 printout, two-sided. I'm going to bring that document up for the community to be able to see for anybody watching at home. So bear with me for just 1 second. I'm hoping everybody can see. So we have this third document that's called the 2021-22 Proposed Capital Projects, formatted for viewing. I just uploaded that here about 20 minutes ago. So I'm going to bring that up so everybody can see that. And we'll do what we can, because it's a very wide document, and I can scroll back and forth if needed. But I think the important parts, I'm going to see if I can't split screen it. I'll have to scroll back and forth just a little bit. And what I wanted to share with this, a few key pieces, is column B, which is the school, which is that number that I was referencing. We have a project type and a project name, which really references what we're doing at that. So as this first example is project code of 2019. That's when it was actually addressed as a project. My first question to Mr. Ross was, is that when it was slated to be done? No. That's when it was identified as a future project. So I think that was important clarification. It is at Green Tree, heating, ventilating, air conditioning. Mr. Ross is the individual who identified it. It's a rooftop unit replacement. I think you'll see a lot of those on the list this year. And the reason behind that is that a lot of our rooftop units have exceeded their life. They're beyond the expected life, and so we're addressing it at this point in time. Again, rooftop unit, and Mr. Ross indicates even they keep track of which one it is. This is rooftop unit number 7. As he indicated, it's exceeded its useful life. It has then as well a cost, anticipated cost, and he spent a fair amount of time researching this and understanding this, of $16,224. It would be addressed this summer.
Andy, just to give the public some frame of reference, do you have an ETA on expected useful life of a rooftop unit? We're talking 20 years?
I think a normal rooftop unit is typically around closer to a 15-year.
Okay.
Some of these exceed 20 plus years.
That they've been in service already?
Yep.
Okay.
If you'd like any more information, like as an example with this rooftop, please let me know, and Dave and I can work on that to get you when this was originally installed, to know how old it was.
Sure.
We can provide that.
I think just having the perspective on, an investment of $16,000 is going to last us approximately 15 years, maybe 20 if we drive it right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just go quickly, and if there is any questions, for the most part, this is organized by building. Keep in mind that the important part behind this is we had the referendum coming up on 2 years ago. I think some of the future of our buildings is yet uncertain, and so we're trying to make sure that we're responsible with spending dollars. You're going to see a couple Jackson projects. There's going to be a finishes touch at Jackson in the library. There's going to be some furniture and fixtures in that same library that would be mobile if at some point something was done with that building, whether it was an overall renovation or a replacement, such as that was on the 2019, April of 19 referendum. There's a small parking lot section that is the playground that is literally crumbling. I think Mr. Hansen indicated, I hope it's okay for HIPAA, but he was actually injured here a couple of years ago. So It's been 2 years since that incident took place, but that's the condition of our parking lot. But we understand that at a minimum, we're still going to be in any of our buildings just about for the foreseeable future, meaning out 5 or so years, even if construction and a referendum, successful referendum and whatnot. So we're trying to be proactive right now and understanding that we need to be responsive, yet minimize those costs. So again, organized pretty much by school. I think there's a couple outliers that they're not sequential, but Green Tree has several HVAC, Decorah, a couple more of these rooftop units at that building. Quite a few rooftop units at Decorah.
Andy, do you know at Decorah, does this effectively completely refresh the HVAC system in that building?
So rooftop units are different than what a standard heating system would be. And so rooftop units will incorporate the air intake as well as the exhaust, and any potential reheating if needed above and beyond a boiler system, and then the air conditioning behind that if there is air conditioning as a part of that. So I can't say that just the rooftop units alone would address all of the HVAC. I don't know if we're addressing all of the rooftop units.
Okay, and I think that was more my question of, does this take care of all of the rooftop units would be the more
Scribble
appropriate.
that note down.
Okay.
I can make sure I get back to you. And if my pocket vibrates, that means it's Dave, and I'll answer that question because I think he's.
Thank you, Dave.
We're going to bridge into the high school, a roofing project, and again, and I meant to say earlier, a large, overwhelming majority of this is either funded from Fund 41, which is our facilities maintenance trust. That's where we've been putting in about $1.5 million. This year we curbed it down just a little bit because we put above and beyond that last year. Above and beyond that, we also have our Fund 46, where there is monies available, and again, that would have been able to be begin being spent this last July. We're not touching that at this point in time. It's not needed, but between Fund 41 and Fund 46, all of these projects would be funded through that. So when you take a look at the total of the $1.7 million, that would be funded, much like prior years, within that budget and being able to utilize those dollars that we put in on an annual basis. High school, some roofing, different sections. Some asphalt. The district-wide, that's where Mr. Ross and his team, they analyzed the different areas and whatnot, so this isn't particular to one area. So the district-wide addresses patching and whatnot throughout the area. And so as you'll notice, the $30,000, that's a round number, but that's what's used to address all those problem areas that Mr. Ross and his team have identified. Same with the concrete. We've got different concrete district-wide that we'll be replacing and repairing in exterior areas. Some more roofing, again, district-wide. This would not be a full section that he'd typically identify in an area, a different elevation in a building. So generally this expenditure would be repairs to all different roofs throughout the district and whatnot for, again, a cost of approximately $30,000, trying to live within that budget that he's identified. Some security measures, replacing some security components, again, district-wide throughout the district as they've identified in their study. As well, Superintendent Wimmer has spent time with the principals. You'll notice that the requester on all of these is Mr. Ross. He facilitates this process. I know when Superintendent Wimmer went about the district, spent time in all of the buildings, had a lot of discussions with the building leaders in putting in requests. We are making some changes to that process as well to further enhance and solicit feedback, help use that to prioritize, and then complete those projects whenever the budget and the prioritization allows. Some nifty nibbles, so with the commercial, family and consumer science area, looking at doing a small remodel in that area, $90,000, still living within their area, but remodeling that a little bit. kind of exciting from a programmatic standpoint. McLean has a restroom need that we'll be addressing. High school, back to some security signage at the high school that greatly needs to get done. I think it's pretty easy to get lost in this building, and utilizing this to create a little bit more rhyme and rhythm behind where you are in the building and the numbering. It'll allow first responders and whatnot to be able to be a little bit more consistent with where they are in the building and responding to an incident. Green Tree, minor locker replacement. That building was touched as a part of the last referendum. However, they're in need of some lockers within their area, not just cosmetic, but in actual need. Jackson Asphalt, we've got a small area of the playground. This, I believe, would also be used for the busing area. Would that be correct, Lenny? Yeah, thank you. The asphalt repair, thank you. Yep, thank you, at $125,000. And then as well, they've, oops, I jumped. High school plumbing, main plumbing replacement. So this is a 5-inch main in the first area, running down the corridor, and it is beginning to be rather problematic. So I've incorporated that. McLean, some FF&E, so lockers, much like we were talking about a Green Tree, and making sure not just aesthetically but functional is occurring as well. We'd like to continue with that model of the lockers rather than the cubbies. High school, some finishes with some flooring. We've got a third of the south gym that we'd be addressing, and that would meet our needs at this time because it, again, has met its expected life. Jackson Library is where I indicated that we would have some work. $40,000 would be identified right now for ceiling, lighting, paint, and carpet. And if you've been there, it really is a need, again, being there for the foreseeable future. I think that would give our students and staff a nice ability to be able to utilize that space differently. Couple FF&E, meaning furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Library furniture, Mr. Ross has identified a dollar amount for that area at Jackson, as well as a dust collector, particular to the wood shop here at the high schools. Totaling $1.735 million. This would be brought forward on January 11th for your approval, but certainly happy to answer any questions.
Notice that all the projects have a requested start and end date starting July 1, ending August 26. Are they designed to all these projects over summer?
Yeah, correct. The large majority of these would be addressed during the summer. What Mr. Ross is sticking with here is that July 1st is the start of our fiscal year. It would not surprise me if we got a jump start on this. The one problem being is the funding with the fiscal year and crossing that. So you will notice when we have our audit discussion here within the next month, that was one of the items that the auditors identified, is making sure that when we do cross those years with the fiscal component, that it's identified just a little bit differently. I think Mr. Ross is being sensitive to that need. Yeah. But we'll fully utilize the June 8th, June 10th for start and whatnot. So.
Great. Tommy?
Can you remind me which came first, the amount of money that is available for capital improvement, or the list of items that were determined to not be able to wait?
You will notice that the one thing, and I believe Mr. Ross has included a little bit of contingency within each project in case there's some unknowns that come up, but that total of the 1.735 million is meant to be a little bit flexible in the sense that as we are building next year's budget, when we're starting that process now, hopeful that we're able to transfer in, because again, this is money that's going from the general fund into that Fund 41, that capital improvement trust, between 1.7 and 2.0 million, allowing him some flexibility. So we kind of keep both in play when we're doing that, and allow them to work and have a little bit of interplay. And eventually you do have to cross the line and say, this is what we believe we can afford. So, thank you for asking.
I know the list is long of all the things that we wish we could replace or or update. Is there I assume there's an ongoing list that Dave keeps for, I'm just curious as to what, like, maybe the top 5 things that didn't quite make the cut were, just so the community can understand that we are trying to be as sensitive as possible to spending money, and we're not just buying furniture for Jackson Library because it doesn't look good.
Absolutely. So we've got a long-term facilities plan. These projects are identified on that. The list does continue, that if another 2 million or another 5 million, I know the list would continue. Sometimes you have to get into the scope or the amount of work that can get done over the summer. So I mean, that is a variable. But yes, we have a long list of items. It's a deferred list, but when I take a look at our parking, our roofs, we've stayed very current. We've been very responsive to staying current with those topics, keeping track of your envelope, the building outside, whether that's the roof, the walls. We've done a very good job keeping track of that. But there is the list, like the McLean bathrooms. They've probably needed it for a time. They've made the list. We're addressing that this next summer. And there will be other projects like that over for the foreseeable future.
Superintendent, we've obviously been distracted, and appropriately so, with COVID. But during the interview process, we talked about our facilities challenges. Can you give us an update on where we are and maybe a very rough timeline on a long-term district facilities plan?
Sure. So one of the first things I did was take vacation from my former job and spend 3 days with Dave touring all facilities. I've been on roofs, I've been in boiler rooms, I've been everywhere to look at and understand the scope. Then I started unpacking the referendum pieces and the facilities plan that needs update. Because what you're talking about, there's usually a heat map or an index around it that goes from critical to, must-haves, failing, those pieces to what's a want, and that needs an update. So Dave and I have talked about that. We also, this fall, kind of as Mr. Sarno was saying, kind of shifted the process a little bit. So principals, head custodians were more involved, and because they're part of those day-to-day operations, and that surfaces the connection to the instructional program, not just having, roofs and things like that, but there's some connections to the environment for learning. One of the things that we'll do, and I'll speak to it in the open enrollment policy and some of the shifts, we need to have effective, efficient buildings. We know that our enrollment is declining, and so we need to look at and make wise investments. Dave and I foresee being able to kind of lead into the spring with a more in-depth analysis, kind of taking that 25-year current plan and kicking over the rock on it and having some more progressive updates. I hope to have the community engaged. COVID has kind of put a damper on those things. We certainly do Zoom and different means of engagement, but I hope to launch this summer with a community engagement sessions around the vision for our schools and our future. I'm sure buildings are going to come up and be part of that conversation, but that needs to be a critical piece of it as well. So I would say, as you were talking about, more comprehensive look, more of an index around need versus want, and then a long-term future and a connection to the instructional vision would start being pieced together in spring with community input, hopefully starting as soon as this summer.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate Dave's diligence in vetting the needs versus the wants. I personally am challenged with sticking money into a money pit, and we look at how decor was factored into the community study, and this proposal here, lays up $167,000 going up on the roof to keep fresh air coming in the building, and I respect that we're probably at least 5 years down the road from doing anything with new facilities. And whether or not that includes decor is anybody's guess at this point. So we need to do the responsible thing. And I believe we are, but this is kind of that repercussion of not making the referendum decision, okay, now we've got to stick significant money into a facility where in 10 years we might be doing something different.
And I did hear back from Mr. Ross. I pulled my phone out. A rooftop unit, typical life is indeed 15 years, so I do that. And he also indicated that Decorah of the rooftop units at that building that are on the list would complete all of the rooftop units for that building. So have a couple answers for you.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you, Dave.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the information. Thank you. The next item on our agenda, Mr. Hanson will join us again. Discussion of proposed micro-credential course offerings and 2021-2022 certified staff expertise pay.
All right, thank you for welcoming me back. I'm very excited to speak to you about this topic tonight. We talked about our compensation model quite a bit earlier, and we talked about how some components of it had to be delayed in their implementation, such as a novice salary scale that you approved earlier this evening. This is another really exciting part of that teacher compensation model, kind of that, in my mind, the last piece that in an ideal world we would have proposed all at once in a non-virus environment. But this is that final really critical component that I think brings our compensation model full circle and provides a real wide range of opportunities for our certified staff members. So that compensation model included a variety of ways that our certified staff can increase their salary through a variety of continuing education opportunities. So you may recall, there's an additional stipend that teachers earn every year if they have a master's degree in their content area, or a license, an additional educator license in certain targeted areas that we think are really essential for us to meet our students' needs. Those two opportunities are a little bit more traditional approaches to recognizing teacher expertise in the form of compensation. But as you recall, there was another pathway focused on micro-credentialing and micro-endorsements that was a key component of the new model. And due to the pandemic, we weren't able to bring forth those kind of initial proposals at the time, but now we are. So tonight what I'm going to do is share with you the developments that we've had on that. My goal would be to answer questions you have about this so that we can make any adjustments necessary so that at the January 11th board meeting, we can propose these for board approval. These offerings of micro-credential courses for our staff are another piece that, like the novice salary scale, would be presented to the board every year for approval so that it doesn't get stale, so that we stay cutting edge with ensuring our staff are getting the most necessary and highly applicable continuing education options, and then recognizing that with compensation increases. So again, I kind of just gave you the background behind that. I gave a little bit of history, which we've talked about many times before. In determining how to select micro-credential options, we went through a lot of iterations and a lot of different investigations. So there are micro-credentials in the education field offered all over the place, okay? And the cost associated with them has an enormous range. What we found in investigating a lot of them is that many of the offerings, especially some of the free ones or some that just kind of anybody can just walk in and take, did not have the rigor and impact on student learning that we felt was necessary to justify offering additional pay to our employees for completing them. That led us to really take a step back and say, what are those key criteria? What is that rubric that we would follow to determine whether a micro-credential meets that baseline level of rigor that we think is critical? In the end, that led us to looking at partnering with some organizations that are experts in the field of micro-credentialing. We considered we considered 3 different kind of nationwide vendors, as well as some local university partners. we were very particular about our expectations and not really willing to lower our standards because our students deserve the highest standards, our staff deserves the highest standards, our community deserves it. In the end, all of that vetting led us to land on 2 initial partners, university partners that we are excited to work with that will be the provider of our initial slate of micro-credential offerings. Those 2 partners are Cardinal Stritch University and Concordia University of Wisconsin, both based kind of on the North Shore part of town. That doesn't mean that these are exclusive providers. We are definitely looking to expand our repertoire, but at this point, our goal was to get a really strong slate of initial options out to our staff so if they want to engage in this part of the compensation model, they can start doing so right away in the second semester. For this initial slate of offerings, we were really looking for micro-credentials that focused on areas that any member of our certified staff could engage with. As you can imagine, that we have a wide range of employees that fall in that group, anywhere from your typical classroom teacher to a physical education teacher to a tech ed teacher to a school psychologist and counselor. It's a large gamut of different employee groups. So finding offerings that apply to all of them was something that took quite a bit of time, but we think we found some good options. It was also essential that we really target some key areas of student need as well as teacher expertise that we thought would be high leverage with these, and especially focusing on the needs of all students and not necessarily just zeroing in with all of the micro-credentials on one group. And then beyond that, we really, and the board talked about this as well when we talked about the design of the compensation model in the spring, but we want to use this as an opportunity for our teachers to grow some real strong depth of expertise in certain areas. So as you'll see, we've kind of targeted these options in that way. So what we've done is we've kind of created initially here kind of 2 different tiered levels of engagement that our staff can choose to take in order to increase their compensation. The option through Cardinal Stritch is kind of a lower initial investment in terms of tuition and whatnot, but that for many of our employees will offer an easier entry point into this system. Whereas you'll see with the Concordia option, there's a higher level of initial investment by the employee, but then a higher level of compensation on the back end upon completion of it. We've identified 2 areas with Cardinal Stritch that we're going to target first as opportunities. Staff can choose to not engage with this, right? It may not be the right time in that person's life. But an employee who wants to grow their expertise and start taking advantage of these opportunities can choose at any time to start engaging with these. So the 2 areas we've looked at here are one around facilitating remote learning and then social emotional supports for students. And what we've really designed these around is teachers completing a small cluster of 2 to 3 courses, and it's 3 courses around the topics that fall within that area. Upon completing those 3 courses, the employee then gets an annual amount added on to their compensation because of that. The social emotional support for students here from Cardinal Stritch is a pre-existing program that they've already developed and used with a couple of districts before. The facilitating remote learning option is one I'm really excited about. That's our first attempt at a custom designed course for the West Bend School District. So we have employees right now partnering with Mr. Harder, our Director of Technology, and myself, who are developing the custom courses that are going to be delivered by our own employees through the university that are specifically targeted to the way we use technology in our district. So we're really excited about that. In fact, our own employees who partner in the development of this will even get to be able to teach them and add to their resume that they are an adjunct professor at Cardinal Stritch University. So it's a really great professional growth opportunity and resume builder for our employees as well. So those are the 2 areas that we're looking at there. As you can see, I kind of lay out kind of the investment necessary of the employee as well as the compensation that they receive upon the completion there, which you see below. The Concordia options, we have a little bit wider range of opportunities there. The Concordia options are actually true graduate classes. So what we've done is we've worked with Concordia to identify specific graduate courses that we can cluster together around specific areas that we really want to focus resources and energy into, and those are identified there. The investment, as I get into here, is a larger investment because they're true graduate credits, but the amount of compensation an employee can receive for completing them is higher as well. So there's another educational technology item. I don't need to speak anymore about why educational technology is more important than ever this year. There's other pieces around social emotional learning, and really targeting that is a response to what our staff has been calling for multiple years now. They want to grow their competencies and toolbox and strategies around meeting unique social emotional needs. So we're excited to offer two different opportunities to do that. There's a section here around meeting needs of some of our advanced learners. You know, that's a group that we don't want to that we don't want to fall by the wayside. It's an important large group of our student body, and meeting their needs is sometimes done in a little bit different manner and using different strategies. There's also there's a focus on one of the micro endorsements around meeting unique behavioral needs, another area that our staff has called for, wanting to again, expand their strategies and their toolbox of how working with students who demonstrate those sort of unique needs. And then the final one is supporting students with at-risk needs, which actually by completing that micro-credential, which is a little bit one less course than the others, you actually receive an additional DPI license as well. So it really kind of boosts the educator's resume as well by participating in these opportunities. I kind of laid out the timeline already of what we're looking to accomplish here, but if we stick to that timeline, our staff would be able to begin, engaging with these options in late February, and then potentially even earning the additional compensation if they've completed all the work by this coming September. Some of the key elements that we absolutely demand to be present in our micro-credentials are obviously the acquisition of new learning, the implementation and application of that learning with our students and demonstrating the evidence of that. And that's kind of a hallmark of a micro-credential in general, is that it's not just learning, but it's the application. So the things that our staff learn in these offerings, they will apply and then submit evidence to their university of, here's how I applied it, here's how it went. And then the final element that's really critical to us is student reflection. So collecting student feedback about how did this new strategy, new approach, how did they feel it impacted their learning? And that is a great feedback piece for the teacher to take as they move forward in continuing to implement these opportunities. As we move further into the future, we are really excited. We think we have a lot of opportunity for a lot more custom designed courses that are really going to align to our specific instructional models that can help us. We're really excited about the ability to continue expanding the number of our employees who get to teach some of these. We think that's a great opportunity for our staff, and again, just targeting those West Bend School District focus areas. The other item I wanted to bring up is, as we got into really analyzing what is the proper way to compensate for completing this work, it really led us to review all of those expertise pay options. And one of the other items that's going to be brought to the board on an annual basis by our new compensation model is looking at all of these expertise pay opportunities. So there's a proposal here to make some adjustments on some, but not on others. What we feel these adjustments that I'm going to present to you allow us to do is to make sure that the micro-credential offering compensation is in good alignment with the pre-existing offerings. So especially when you're looking at graduate credits, so we offer some compensation for some of those additional licenses like I talked about, or a master's degree. Well, the per credit amount earned needs to be somewhat in line with the per credit amount earned on these micro-credential offerings. And as we've seen, in one area particularly that I'll get into, the licenses, we feel we've been undervaluing those additional licenses. So some examples of that might be say you're a classroom teacher, a first grade teacher. but you happen to also have a reading license that is usually only held by a reading specialist, right? Or a reading teacher. That makes you especially even more impactful. That knowledge we really feel is very valuable in the area of reading. We've been compensating at $1,100 per year addition for that employee if they have that license. It's not really in line with the amount of investment needed in terms of credit. So we are proposing increasing that amount on 3 really key licenses that we feel target some of the gap areas, the achievement gap areas that the district needs to target the most in order to meet the needs of all students. So I have that proposal here. Under this proposal, we would keep the master's degree at the same level that it has been at. We did increase it this past year when you approved the compensation model. We would also keep national board certification where it is. I should note for you that national board certification is a match. So actually the state also compensates the employee $2,500. So I tell everybody, if you want to make more money in education, get board certified because at minimum the state's going to give you $2,500, and if you work for West Bend School District, you double that. So it's a great opportunity, but it is a strenuous process for sure, and really requires a great level of commitment. The big increase we see is in those 3 licenses that you see on the left side, proposing an increase by $1,000 to those stipends for individuals with those licenses. We truly feel that those licenses mean something, right? Like you know that there's certain, maybe certain degree areas in other fields maybe that don't necessarily translate into expertise in the field when they carry it out. Those licenses, they mean something. Someone who has gone through that rigorous process to get an English learner license, reading license, or special education license, that has made them a tangibly more expert educator, and that's going to make an impact on our students. So we really want to value that, and that's the core reason for this proposal here. So again, this is just for discussion tonight. Love to collect any questions and feedback so that hopefully we can present for proposal for approval in January. Ms. Schmidt?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. The areas that we're trying to close gaps in are the areas that you want to focus the motivation for students to attain more education. My question, though, is about the national board certification. Is that a single test, or is it separated out for some of these things like reading and special education or STEM?
So, national board certification is available to a wide range of types of educators. Not every single person who's a certified staff member has a national board option, but most of them do. National boards is accomplished. It's really a multi-year process if you're really going to do it. You're talking about a lot of recording of yourself and submitting lessons and submitting artifacts of your work. You're talking about multiple examinations that take place over a spaced amount of time. They are challenging. I'm going to tell you I don't remember the percentage off the top of my head, but a large percentage of individuals who take those exams do not pass them, especially on the first time. But it is a long-term investment of energy to get there. While I was at Jackson, I had 3 teachers go through that process while I was there. It took at least 2.5 years. I'm trying to remember for them. They worked together on it, a lot of collaboration. There's a ton of reflection that goes into it. I mean, I would, someone who has gone through that process truly views themselves as a professional educator, and I think it truly does speak to the dedication that someone has to honing their craft when they go through that process.
Lenny, given the overview of the rigor between the Stritch and the Concordia program, and assuming based on the pricing delta, there's 2 different levels of commitment. But if I'm an educator and I'm looking at taking a course from either of these providers, what kind of time commitment are we asking of our staff?
So rigor was equal, right? The expectation of rigor was equal, but time commitment was the difference. So those Concordia courses are true 3-credit graduate courses, right? So you can kind of, we're all familiar with kind of the typical credit model, between 35, 45 hours per course, right? The Stritch courses are not graduate credit courses, they're professional development growth credit hours, which is another kind of standardized unit that universities use, which are generally about 8 to 10 hour commitments. That per course. So it doesn't mean 8 to 10 hours of coursework necessarily, of class time. It's 8 to 10 hours of total coursework, right? So put it in the context of a graduate course, you probably go to class for a portion of time, but there's a large portion of time also assumed that you're putting in your work outside of it. So Stritch, you're looking about 8 to 10 hours is their estimate per course of your time, whereas on those Concordia ones, you're talking more of that 30 to 45 hour investment, like a typical graduate class.
Thank you.
Other questions? Right, thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Hanson. All right, next we have Mr. Tim Harder joining us. Middle school course revision, finance, and information technology. Welcome, Mr. Harder.
Good evening, board members. I'm excited to be here. We've been here multiple times over the last couple of years talking about course name and adjustments in our business and information technology course sequence at the high school level. And so that process is driven by a couple of variety of different ways. Number one, changes that we may see at the Moraine Park Technical College level. Requirements that we may offer our students here. So a couple of years ago, we now require every student at the high school to graduate with a half credit in personal finance. And so our students have that opportunity no matter what career field that they're going into. And we use feedback from local business and industry to drive changes within our CTE programming. And so in front of you this evening is a slight change to our middle school course, which is called FIT, which the name that goes with that sometimes gets confused that it's in the wrong department and we think it's a FIED course. And so it's really about finance and information technology. And working with our staff at Badger Middle School in the business department, we talked about ways to not duplicate learning experiences for our students. And when we brought on the requirement of personal finance, we had some duplication of content and experiences for our students at the middle school level and then when they came to the high school. Working with that team there, they went out and they reviewed a variety of different school districts' exploratory middle school options. And so when you talk about a CTE program at the middle school level, you're really looking at an exploratory experience where kids are given a wide breadth of learning opportunities. So they come to the high school, then they can start to pick and narrow down that career pathway that they have interest in. And so our goal with this course revision and course changes is twofold. One, to change the name, and so the proposed name is Exploring Business, Marketing, and IT, to better help our students better understand what course they are selecting. And number two, it's to retweak those units of study that our students have, removing those redundant personal finance experiences, but not losing some of them. So in our curriculum committee, Mrs. Justman had asked about, will students still experience the basics of things like checking and credit and balancing some money pieces and understanding wages and taxes. That will still exist through a unit involved with junior achievement finance, and so we use that curriculum as part of that. But what we'll be doing is adding additional things around things like the stock market. We're going to add things around marketing and advertising, some traditional finance and accounting career experiences that you might see, along with entrepreneurship. And so we've made an adjustment in our high school curriculum a few years back to expand our entrepreneurship course to a year-long course. And so we really want to build those skills and foster those skills at the middle school level. So the presentation in front of you is a course name change and then those additional course units and then removing any duplicate learning experiences out of that personal finance area. And I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? All right, since this is a discussion item, it'll come back in front of us.
You bet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Next, Superintendent Wimmer is going to talk about the Wisconsin Association of School Boards Delegate Assembly Resolutions.
Yes, so in your packet and on board documents, you can find the Wisconsin Association of School Board resolutions. Reminder that at our last meeting, Joel Ongert will be our representative, so it's always good. We'll make sure that Joel knows what was spoken about tonight. But to go through the resolutions, address any questions, and then provide direction for Joel as he represents the district. So if I can, I'm just going to briefly go through them. In one of the resolutions, it's to apply a 1-cent sales tax for schools infrastructure, technology infrastructure, and for tax relief. In the documents, I give you a summary around the resolution, the rationale, and then any implications for our district. You'll notice that something that had been removed was some funding for technology to the tune of about $73,000 for our district, and Governor Evers had removed that in the 1920 school year, so this would maybe help fill that gap. Are there any questions or feedback for our representative regarding this resolution? Hearing none, I'll move on. Another resolution is to support legislation to expand affordable, reliable, quality broadband access. Again, given the nature of instruction, you can see in our district we have over 100 hotspots deployed, but we know we still have intermittent connectivity issues in the communities that we serve. So this would create funding, federal funding for districts to support this, as well as some loosening up of restrictions around E-rate funds, and that's how we use some technology resources. And Mr. Harder added some detail around, we've got some kind of parameters. This gives us flexibility and a little bit more local control, if you will, around use of those funds. Any questions regarding that piece? So again, something that, thus far, everything will benefit our district. Hold harmless is another one. You're familiar with that term. It's around enrollment, and when districts see declining membership, recall that there's a connection between the number of students we serve and the revenues that we receive. This extends some hold harmless provisions because everyone is facing that due to the extraordinary health emergency. And it just gives some flexibility and some language and advocacy around supporting districts through that, because we are not alone in seeing that decline. Any questions on that piece?
Superintendent, just in terms of the general context of what's here, anything that is approved from WASB, this is simply their to-do list that they then take to the legislature to lobby for.
This is their advocacy agenda.
Okay.
What they're doing is they're asking membership, all districts, to weigh in on these key items. So these have been brought forth from districts, leaders from across the state. So again, we're just helping solidify their advocacy agenda. It doesn't mean any of these things will happen. It just means that they are supportive in the legislature for those items. Great question.
Okay, thank you.
There is another resolution regarding Wisconsin Act 31, which is instruction regarding indigenous tribes. I noted the different grade levels where we do some specific instruction around those tribes native to Wisconsin, as well as across the country. Any resources that are developed, we utilize and are thankful for. So again, that's currently an act that we meet instructionally, but again, any additional resources are always welcome. Any questions around that? Right. Special education flexibility to address emergency situations. There is something called maintenance of effort, where you have to hit certain target dollars on what you spend. Certainly the pandemic disrupted. One of the large expenditures that was a disruption was transportation. We simply didn't have a need to transport students. So that changes some of the services that you're providing and those things. So it's not meant to change the bar on your level of service, but it's, again, granting you some exceptions and some local flexibility so that you can use those dollars and still hit those targets that are associated with maintenance of effort. So again, really proud of the work that our teams are doing right now in the area of special education. You'd be amazed. It's nice to be in person. At the high school model, I know our teams have students 4 days a week and are wrapping around and deploying services, but there's also services that are virtual. So again, this is just giving local control and flexibility around some of those funding pieces. Okay. The next one is around assessment and report card waivers. So while we are continuing to participate in local assessments like the STAR assessment and in tune to understanding where our kids are and making sure that they are all growing, this is really looking at the report card that's publicly published. When there's no metric, we did not give a spring state assessment, which would allow some comparisons. We're just talking about in those years, there shouldn't be report cards published, but advocating certainly for continued local assessment in the absence of state assessments. They have said that they are not moving forward with the NAEP, which is a national assessment where pockets of sample districts are just taken, but they are working towards a state assessment this spring to be deployed, whether virtually or in person. So they are working on that. We anticipate some type of state testing this spring. So again, it's just looking at how that report card is published and how that's addressed with the public during strange times such as pandemics. Another piece is rehiring retired teachers and staff. So right now there's some differing rules for us around hiring retirees. They have to sit out 75 days. There's certain caps that they have to fall in at a time where we are hurting for staff members to fill in as subs or help supplement the workforce. Any kind of, again, local flexibility that we can get to bring in people with experience is of value to us. So it's just loosening up some of those restrictions that are placed on districts, especially in hard to fill areas. You know, if you were looking in a technical education, special ed is getting harder and harder to fill. There's different areas. So it's nice to be able to draw on any kind of pool, especially for subbing right now. Everyone's hurting.
Do you know at what rate they get hired back at? I know the intent of not of these restrictions is to avoid double dipping. And so, and also we want to encourage younger people to apply for positions too. We don't want to, but I understand there is a shortage.
Right.
And
so
a
we would
need,
go
so
through. Yep.
How do you balance those two things?
So we would go through a hiring process around something, but there are some times where someone has to take an emergency medical leave and it's a really discrete area or something of that nature. So as you said, we're looking to recruit and retain and keep staff with us for a long time. So we would go through a rigorous hiring process for any position, but there are some times where we're caught. If they're being hired as a substitute, all those rates apply to them as well. They don't get any kind of special rate and they don't get restored, let's say, and it doesn't mean just retirees from our system, it means any retiree. So it doesn't mean someone who's coming back to us gets restored at that certain salary. It's dependent upon the job. And if it's a certified contract of any kind, that still comes before the board. Lenny, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
The only thing I would add is that, you know, as opposed to the salary component, which teachers kind of understand when they come back from retirement, it's going to look a little different. The bigger issue that is the WRS component, that really it's about, they want to be able to continue to earn that, you know, that pension reward, I guess, or they've earned it, it's not a reward, but they want to continue to pull from their pension, but also help the district, and especially, you know, when we have certain areas that person has a specific license and I just need someone to teach one section of it, I'm never going to find someone who's going to take a 0.2 FTE position, but I've got this great retiree here, right? And, you know, what ends up happening is districts will play games with teachers on call and vendors and things like that to try and put the employee there so they don't go over their 880 hours. And in the end, you end up coming up with a less efficient process, and it's not the best thing for kids. It's not the best thing for the employee or the district. So flexibility here kind of is beneficial on both sides, district and the retiree.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to consider both things, and I can totally see that scenario occurring. And we do have some really talented people that it's just sad to see them go off into the sunset.
Well, and sometimes you speak to, sometimes there's such institutional knowledge and that professional, so even being able to hire in some capacity to mentor or guide new staff and provide some of those things, that could be of benefit. So it might not be to fill those things. There's other value in being able to, kind of keep your hooks in that talent, if you will, too. So it's important. The next one is on superintendent evaluations. I think everyone is well aware that a superintendent evaluation is public, in that it's disclosed under public records law. So they're looking to advocate for some confidentiality to the framework for a superintendent's evaluation, noting that it's really rare for employees to obtain and access full evaluative records of their supervisor, that type of thing. Just know that as Chris and I meet to kind of frame our process for evaluation, we're planning to meet the tenets of it being publicly accessible. Mm-hmm. There's also an item regarding comprehensive school safety legislation. So it's just looking at new permanent and consistent funding for districts to continue to stay on point with safety. And the last one is around district mascots, logos, and imagery, just making sure that it's safe, welcoming, and doesn't interfere with learning. I think it's really that when you see around Native Americans, around things like that of that nature, I've listed all of our mascots. We do not have any that would fall into those categories in any way, shape, or form. So those are the resolutions. Again, we'll provide information to Joel regarding his representation of the district so he can attend that meeting in January.
Great. Any additional discussion on that item? All right. If not, Superintendent Wimmer will walk us through the first reading of Board Policy 423, Open Enrollment Program Interdistrict.
Sure. So I've included in your materials the current 423, which kind of leaves open enrollment quite open, if you will, meaning that any application is taken in and accepted through the district, barring any of the things in statute would lay out a student who had been expelled, that type of thing. Given the kind of shifting sands of enrollment, and the stewardship that I feel we need to bring to our community around using our buildings wisely, and looking at potential, closing some down, that kind of thing. We want to have some parameters around this acceptance. And that should start with us forecasting to you, the board, the enrollment that we see, the class sizes, and then we should declare how many seats are open in that. Because if we were to just kind of blindly accept every student who applies, let's say I have in third grade, all my classes are at like 28. I have a really big, third grade class across the district. I don't really have any spot. And now I have to accept 5 new kids, and we as a community have class sizes over 30, or I have to trip into hiring a new teacher with all the associated salaries and benefits. So there should be some checks and balances, and there's certain legislation and certain acts that help narrate what are the pieces of the puzzle that you need in a policy to help guide your decision making. So it doesn't mean at this time that as we look at this policy that we're saying, no, we're closed to open enrollment. We want to be a destination district. We want to welcome students and families in our community, and they'll love it enough that they'll purchase their homes here and stay with us. But the other piece is we really have to manage that. The other thing that's sitting in this is looking at just a blanket percentage around special education, saying 15%. Natural proportions on students with disabilities is really 14%. So we're saying we would inflate the needs within our district with outside enrollment without attention to looking at caseloads. So students who have disabilities, we don't just look at as numbers, we really look at individual students and needs, and we weight caseloads, and that's how we assign teachers and provide services. So again, blindly kind of accepting in all students and all needs, I could trip into having to hire new staff just by welcoming some kids inside. So what you see before you is WASB language that is in attention to the components that you need to declare publicly around your process. So what that looks like is in January, I would bring you the projected seats. I actually backwards map it from the appeal process at the state, and there's a worksheet involved, and you look at a target 15% less than what that is, so that we always have room for our students who are moving into our community without creating artificially high class sizes or forcing us to hire new staff. So then in your January meeting, then I would project this to you, show you that worksheet, and say, this is how many seats I see open in regular ed, this is how many seats I see open in special ed, and the board formally approves that. And we go through this process of lottery, of wait lists, and all those things. So this is setting a foundation of process. You still, at your January meeting, have the ability to declare exactly how many seats you want open. This is just giving us the foundation of process. And again, this is WASB's recommended legal language. And then we just wanted to surface that discussion. Joel and I had a conversation, surface the discussion, talk about any questions that you have, bring this back to the policy committee to make any recommended revisions before bringing this back to the full board again. So are there any questions around the process or the why and the how you would use this as board members?
I think it sure looks like a measured way to go through the process, detailed, transparent. I look forward to seeing this back for consideration.
Great.
Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you. We have one information item on our agenda, and that's educational options in the West Bend School District for 2021, 2022, and Laura Jackson will walk us through that. Good evening.
So each year in December, our families receive a notice of the educational options available to residents of the West Bend School District. And that notice to our families that is sent in the month of December precedes a Class 1 notice that is published in the paper in West Bend and on our website in January. In the board packet, you have a copy of the parental notice that was reviewed at the curriculum committee this past week. And each year, the required information is provided in the parental notice. Now, the parental notice, we have a few more things in it that are required to be sent out in the Class 1 notice as well. One of the first components on it is always our accountability rating on the state report card. As we spoke of earlier in this meeting, the state report cards normally come out in November. However, this year they are not being released because we did not do state testing this previous spring. So there's no state report card being sent out this year. So the most recent accountability rating is from the previous school year. So based on the state assessments in the 18-19 school year, the accountability ratings of our schools are listed. And the following the accountability rating are some brief descriptions of the variety of programs offered within the school district. The parental notice talks about our early college credit, Start College Now, and part-time open enrollment options. The virtual program is highlighted, as well as the fact that there are certain other programs leading to high school equivalency diplomas, as well as the typical high school diploma. We are also required to list information for families on schools participating in the private school choice program. The schools that are currently listed on the DPI website are represented on this form, and a link to the DPI website that houses the form, the information on schools participating in the parental choice program is linked right on the document. West Bend has processes in place for educating students who are homeless. Homelessness through the McKinney-Vento Act is school districts take steps to try to minimize the impact that homelessness has on our students. And Sharon Kalis, our Director of Pupil Services, oversees those programs. So the information on homelessness is also included. This notice will be sent again in the family newsletter that goes out to all of our families through Nancy Kunkler, and this will be sent in the next notice that goes home to families.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, we appreciate the refresher, and thanks for updating the document. All right. That takes us to future agenda items. So on our board meeting calendar, Erin mentioned the curriculum committee, which meets on January 5. We have 2 regular school board meetings scheduled in January, one on January 11 and one on January 25. Let's see, and we have no other school board meetings scheduled for the month of December in recognition of the holiday. Any questions on the board calendar? All right. Hearing none, we're to items for follow-up and communication. Is there any other business to come before the board at this time? All right, I'm hearing none, so I would move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kurt. Motion and second to adjourn. Any final discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.